And to install these mods, you'll need to first detach the fan shroud and cable harness from the printer head. You'll want to unscrew the back plate and unplug all your connectors. So that's a T10 Torx. And then also on the front, you'll want to remove your fan. So for me, I have already swapped this fan out to an Octua fan, 5 volt. And in here, sliding that down, there are some screws. I don't know if you can see them. Yeah, there they are. In the top right and top left that are also Torx 10 that will need to come undone. On the back, here are all your connectors. You'll need to undo these. Now, what you'll want to do is take off this screw. Oh, and it looks like my limit switch is still in there. That's okay. Let me pop this guy off. And then I can slide him out of the way. In here, there are 2 screws, 2 Phillips, one on the left, one on the right. I think. Okay, once you've got it loosened, it should come right off. Okay, next, you want to take off the Wally block. So that's this front guy here. This is the T20. These top screws up here as well. I forgot about these guys. Got that. And this is the same process for the compound head as well. Okay. Take this guy and we'll set him aside. Next, you'll want to remove the belts from the printer head. That's 2 T10s right here. I have the belts out of the printer head now, at least the retaining block for the belts. And before I go any further, I'm going to loosen the tension that I have on the belts by loosening the X and the Y motors in the back here. To get to this one on the right side of the printer, you'll need a T10 and loosen the cable chain retainer from here, and you'll need a set of pliers to hold the nut down there. So I've taken the nut off of the harness here. I can lift this up and simply slide it out of the way, and that'll give me access to the screws that adjust tension on the belts. My T10, we'll go ahead and just loosen these guys. Don't need to take them all the way off, just loosen them. Sorry, I'm not left-handed. And then you're going to do the same for the other side. Right here. Loosen this guy, loosen this guy. You can see it slid quite a bit. And now this harness should be a lot looser for us to work with. I'm going to take these belts and slide them off their idlers. So that one, that guy, and it's okay if this falls. We're going to be adjusting it later when we install the new idlers. Pull this guy out. And now we have access to the screws that hold them onto the linear rails. You'll want to take 3 out here on the left side. Focus. And then the other 3 on the right side here. Just take those guys out, and the whole gantry should fall as one piece. Make sure you're holding it before it falls. So you're going to loosen the sides of this here. And these may be Loctited on, so they may be hard to get off. I've just done this before. Here's the plate. Set that aside. They both go on the inside. You can take those and put them down. And you can take your printer head and slide it off. Just like that. It's fine. Okay, now we can take the motors off of this printer head with the 4 screws, 2 down here and 2 up there. They're kind of behind this plate, so you may need a long Torx T10, but nonetheless it should come off. So I have those 4 screws out, but I missed 2 more. There's actually going to be another 2 on the inside corners of the motors. When reassembling, we probably won't put it back there since that's hard to get to. Okay, if you're like me, your bit does not quite fit down in there to reach the screw. So what I'm going to do is take a 1/4 inch bit and drill these holes out a bit, so that way my driver can fit through and unscrew those motors. Okay, after getting all these screws out, this plate just comes right off. It'll have a 3D printed spacer. You won't need this, but what you will need are these extruder gears, so put those aside. So now I have the gearbox slash extruder mod. You'll take your extruder gears, and these are keyed, so you'll want to put them on and twist them until they go down, like so, and same for the other one, like so. And then grab your gearbox screws, and you will use these instead or in place of the other screws because of the length of the gearbox that it has to go through. And we're going to put them on the corners of the gearbox. Okay, I have the plate mounted, and when you mount it, you want to make sure that your wires come out the bottom side here. So it should look like this. You'll do just the 4 corners. You don't need to do the inside at the top. Once it's tight, we should be able to get it mounted. Okay, for the bed, I actually found it a little easier if we set the gantry on top of the bed. And so I took a binder clip and just underneath attached it to the Z-belt. And then I set the gantry on top of that. So here's how you can get the limit switch out the housing. Simply pull it forward, and then there'll be a slot somewhere near the bottom that you can typically slide it out of. I think it's in the bottom front. Yeah, so you can see that gap. You'll want your wires to run through that. I've gone ahead and removed the belt a little bit out of the way. So this guy right here, I've just taken them off that gantry. Now I need to get this limit switch out. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to stick a little bit of, I'm going to stick this flathead tip in here. Just push it forward. There's a little gap at the top that you can use. And it comes right out. Pop it out. And then slide that cable through the slot that I put the driver bit through, which is right there. Alright, with the limit switches off, you can go ahead and take the housing off. Just unscrew this guy. And then on the other one, there will be 2. Kind of tricky to get to the other one, but should just be kind of able to angle this and get that other head or screw out. For the X housing, there is a screw on the back side that you have to be aware of, so don't forget that guy. Okay, so I have my limit switches off. It's 4 screws in total, 2 for each. We can confirm that the correct housings go to their correct place by comparing the shape. So as we can see, this is the housing that replaces this one, and this is the housing. It's kind of hard to see the black, but it's replaced by the orange one, and they're longer in each of their dimensions to account for the new idler sizes. For reassembly, it's easier just to take your limit switch cable and slot it into place before you put or mount the housing. So that way you're not fiddling with your fingers up in a tight corner. Okay, now that we have the assembly back on, I didn't actually tighten these on the bolts on the ends all the way down, and that's because we want to make sure we didn't accidentally tweak over our gantry. As you can see, there's a little bit of flex in play. What we want is a smooth, continuous action from left to right. Shouldn't feel a lot of resistance. What I like to do is get it all the way to the left side, and because we didn't actually unscrew this, it should be okay. And then on the other side, slide it all the way over, right, as far as it can go. And then, as best you can, you may need to do this a few times. Tighten it down, right? And test that we didn't accidentally tweak it over. So it should slide pretty freely. I could see that there's a little bit of resistance. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen this and try it again. And it might help, if you have the corners lined up on both. Let's try that. And so yeah, it's a lot better and slides more freely. That way we know it's lined up and the motors won't have to work as hard. Now that we have the printer head on our gantry again, we can go ahead and just screw them back in. Note, we don't have, I took off the old idlers since I'll be doing the new idler mod, and this will make it a lot easier since we'll be mounting it on the underside anyways. Okay, I have the gantry mounted back on its slides. So what I'm going to do now is drop the bed, the Z-axis, or the heated bed. Simply took the clip out that was holding the belt, and now we can install the idler mods right here. Okay, when we do the idler mod, I do suggest taking the bearings off of the brackets. It'll make it easier to mount this piece. In fact, I think it's a part of the installation guide and how you're supposed to do that. Note, when you take it off, be very careful not to lose the spacer. That's kind of important. It's this little white piece here. So that goes with it. And you'll be using your idler screws that came with the kit. So I'm gonna cut over to the printer and show you how it should be mounted. Okay, so the idler mod goes on the piece right here where the old idlers used to sit, and they've included a bracket that your new larger bearings will sit on top of. The way this goes is on the bracket, if it would focus, hello, well hello, there it goes, on the bracket, the holes, the mounting holes are offset to one side, as you can clearly see. The side that is offset, you want to be facing outside of the printer. So this left hole, when I put it on, this bracket, I want facing the outside of the printer. So it should go on like this. If done correctly, the hole should line up, and this side should sit flush with the bracket. Okay, I have the bracket installed. Again, the holes offset on that you screw into go to the outside, and the reason is the places where we screw in the bearings will need to be towards the inside, not to collide with the bracket for the gantry or the linear rail. So right now I have the lower bearings on. I haven't put the upper one on, and that's just because I want to let you guys be aware. You want to make sure your belt that runs across the whole printer, front to back, is sitting above the bracket. Because if you put this bearing on and then put your belt on and it's below, you're going to have this belt run down and then back up instead of the correct way. On the other side, it's the opposite. So you'll want the long belt, this guy that runs from the motors to the front corner, to be under the bracket. So just letting you guys be aware of that. Okay, after you've got your new bearings on, left and right side here, you'll want to run the belts as they were previously. So on this side, you have the belt, you know, on the top running to the back and then around the printer. Just make sure basically all your belts are sitting on the bearings. So they're good here, you know, they're good at your motors, both sides, good on this, and then your front corners. Like that. If that's all good, then what you want to do next is take the screws that held this block in, your belt block, and put them in your printer here. You may want to have your printer head back a little bit, but basically we're going to use this screw and the other screw to line up our gantry, or make sure it's aligned. So once they're in, you know, just slide both sides forward until it's butting up against that screw, like so. Double check your belts, right, on all corners. Since that's good, what I'm going to try to do next is take out as much slack as possible here, so that way we don't have to worry about not being able to tension enough back in the motors. And to do that, all you have to do is simply pull this guy, or loosen one side, and then pull the belts through. So this is already loose. I'm just pulling it. And as you can see, that got longer, and then I'm going to do the same for the top. Just pull it. Okay, actually, before we tension the back sides of our belts, what we want to make sure is that our belt lengths are equal. So an easy way to check this is when your belts are correctly on all of the bearings, take your finger and pull, come on, focus, pull this tight, and what you'll notice is that one of the belts will be tighter than the other, and that you want to tighten the loose one. So I can tell that the top belt is actually loose by a few teeth just by feeling here, and that the bottom belt has a little more resistance. So I'm going to go ahead, pop this block out, loosen this, and pull a few teeth on, it doesn't matter which side, but pull a few teeth over, and then double check the tension again before I tension at the motors. Okay, I've pulled a few teeth to the top side here. I can double check the tension, make sure they feel equal when I pull on it. Go ahead and put this block back in, double check that both sides are butted up against that screw, and then go ahead and tighten with tension. So you'll need to push your motor in like so, and tighten those screws down to keep it in tension. Okay, after tensioning the motors in the back over here, so this is pretty well taut. You can see it doesn't, it's pretty good. I noticed that the bracket no longer butts up against this side, and when I try to, obviously get it aligned, it doesn't want to stay. This side kind of goes back. But this side is completely butted up against it, so this side is in line, this side is not. To fix that, you want to look at the belt, okay, as you pull it forward, and notice that when you pull it forward, your lower belt gets some more slack, okay, versus your upper belt. And so what that means is two things. One, you can attempt making your lower belt tighter by pulling through here, or alternatively, what I think is better is you take your bracket here, loosen the top belt just a bit, and then what that's going to do is allow some more slack into the system, and then you can take that out equally on both sides by loosening and retightening with tension again on your motors, whichever one that might be. So if it's opposite, you may need to do the other side, but I'm going to go ahead and fix that now. Okay, so I've gotten that pretty much fixed. I could be nitpicky, and obviously it's not like crazy close, but with the motors tensioned, it seems to sit quite right. So I'm going to push the printer head back. I'm going to retrieve these screws that I've set into the side here. Oops, sorry. I'm going to take these guys out and then put them back in where they belong, which is to hold the belt bracket in place right here. So where did that guy go? Oops. Okay, I have those screws back in. You can double check that your belts sit on the pulleys correctly. And if all is well, your tension is good, you should be able to feel the axes that the printer head moves in. So forward, backwards, and diagonal. Forward, backwards. It's pretty distinct, the directions here. That seems pretty good to me. Now we can restart assembling the wires in the back, and then put the fan cover back on, as well as the Wally block. Okay, so on the back here, the mod itself screws puts our screws in all four. Well, our fan or our wiring harness slash bracket uses those two screws, so you'll need to take them out in order to use or put this guy back on. So now I can take wiring chain, the cable chain, and reorganize all this stuff back in. Okay, I have the cable harness slash cable chain bracket back on, and I've screwed the cable chain in just enough, but not all the way, so it gives me room to put all these connectors back in. The way you want this facing is sort of half of the stuff will face that way, half the stuff will face that way. Okay, so this is how I'm going to do this. Take your cold in and your nozzle fan and your limit switch and just put it off to the side. You may want to cable or zip tie it to the back of the cable chain here. Gosh, zoom focus is bad. Then take all your number one stuff, and it's going to go above the mount here. So there's a little gap right here. You could take all your number one side, tuck it in there, and that'll face that direction, or the left of your printer from the front, because this is your number one side and this is your number two side. And then all your number two stuff, which is the remaining three connectors, will go on the right side over here. And these do slot in somehow. Okay, I think I've got the number one side figured out. So you'll tuck your thermostat behind your motor, and then the heater will go on the bottom here, right in this spot, which kind of stays. I'll get the other side wired up or in place, and then I'll show you that. Okay, just because it gets a little confusing, this here is your thermostat 2. You'll put that in first. Then you'll want to find your motor. That will go, motor 2 will go on top, like so, roughly about there. This guy needs to go back, came from, like that. And then your last one, your heater 2, will go, and heater 2, it's a tight fit. There we go. It's kind of a bad wiring system, but it is what it is. So, all right. Why aren't these just... Okay, there. This is what it should look like. But the wires won't hold, but it's close enough. Then, your motor 2 can work its way around, and your motor 1 on the other side to up here, and all your sensors and stuff. I've got my fans out to the side because I want them that way. You can go ahead and tighten this if you want right now, but next we're going to put on the Wally block and then the fan shroud, and then wire everything back up. Okay, I have my Wally block back on. This is the Katana, same for the compound. I have my wires all running underneath now. My limit switch is put back. I'm just going to set these fan headers aside until later. But you can essentially start wiring up the back, all the back stuff now. Okay, I have everything wired back up, so I can go ahead and tighten the cable chain, and then put the back plate that covers all these connectors back on. Now you can go ahead and replace or put back the tensioner or retainer for the cable chain here. Remember, you do have the nut on the bottom that needs to attach to the screw. Okay, cable chain is good. I have it tightened here. The retainer is back in. Double check that all the way out. It's not binding anywhere. It's still good. As well as all the way back. Oops. All the way back, but it's not binding anywhere. As you heard, you want to make sure those two limit switches also work. So I think we're good. Everything's good. Now we can put the fan shroud back on. Okay, fan shroud is back on. Just those two screws at the top. I've wired because my extruder fans, or I guess bed, what it's called, not the cold end, but the nozzle fans has a too short of a cable. I've wired it here. Yours might reach back to where, you know, the harness goes. And then all you have to do is reinstall the fan and connect it to the cold end fan. You'll be done. After that, it's just some software setup. Alright, after installing the mods, you'll need to make a few changes to your Promega settings before you can start printing. Load up the web interface, go to Settings, System Editor, and the first thing we're going to edit is Machine Axis Dimension. This is to compensate for the extra width of the idlers. The wide dimension will need to go down by 12, so that'll be 370, and the X dimension will need to go down by 10, which will also be 370. Save those changes, and then the second file you want to edit is Machine Extruder Step. Because the gearbox is geared 3 to 1, what you want to do is take the numbers here after M92 and multiply them by 3, and then I commented out the original value and then pasted in a new set of values that are multiplied by 3. Save those, and at this point you can go ahead and try printing.